was wondering if you wouldn't mind, Lynn, just by introducing yourself a little bit more, your role with Lugosi LLC, and what the company is.
Sure. Again, my name is Lynne Lugosi Sparks. I'm the only granddaughter of Bela Lugosi, and I am very happy and honored to work alongside my dad, Bela Lugosi Jr., to run Lugosi Enterprises and Lugosi LLC. And really our mission is to extend the legacy of Bela Lugosi. We do that in various ways through legacy projects, historical projects, and also licensing for merchandise.
That's wonderful. And how long have you been doing this, Lynn?
Personally, I've been doing this since I think about 2010. Yeah.
Okay, great. And what drew you to your current role?
Well, I just kind of fell into it. Just my dad is retired, but has been an attorney for years and years and years, and he was all along trying to also maintain his father's legacy and protect the rights and do some licensing. And it just got to the point where he wasn't able to do it, and fell into a time in my life where I had time to do it. And I really didn't realize the importance or the prevalence that his name still had, as far as people wanting merchandise or using it for advertising, or set dressing, anything like that. So as I started to just kind of help my dad, I realized that there was a need to really expand and pay attention to all the leads that we had, and all the people and the fans and the artists that wanted to use his name and likeness in an effort to keep his legacy alive.
That's all right. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then your dad, whose name is Bela Lugosi Jr.,
Yeah.
right? He played a really important role with licensing that celebrities still work with today, right?
Yes, yes. In 1963, as a law student at USC here in California, he brought a case against Universal, saying that Bela Lugosi's character as Dracula belonged to him and not to Universal Studios. And at that time, they had started merchandising, models, lunchboxes, various things using Bela's name and likeness. And so the case was actually, he won in the lower courts, and then unfortunately it went all the way up to the Supreme Court of California, 16 years, I believe. Well, 1979, the Supreme Court ruled against us and in favor of Universal. But what they didn't do is they did not disagree. So I guess they agreed with the lower courts that Bela Lugosi's likeness as Dracula belonged to him. And so the reason that we lost that case at that level was that there was no precedent in California that the name and likeness of a celebrity became a property right after their death. And so even though we lost, really that decision was overturned by the legislature of California when they enacted in 1984 the California Celebrity Rights Act, which made the rights to an actor's name and likeness after their death a property right that descended to their heirs.
That's pretty cool. That I think some people come across the court case and learn that it's Lugosi versus Universal, right?
Yeah.
And
yes.
It takes a moment to go, oh, that's Dracula.
Right.
That's funny.
Well, yeah, it's so important, and I'm so proud of my dad for doing that and for following through all of these years, because it really set a precedent and allowed other families of deceased celebrities to protect, their family members' name and likeness.
Right.
It's important because people, do try to take advantage. But I think that by doing the great licensing we do, and having a presence in this little area of horror and classic Hollywood, people respect that we have that right, and they're really kind and ask for a license, and we're always happy to work with people who want to do great things.
That's great. I was going to ask too, like, how do you, I know you and I have had this conversation before, but how do you decide what is a good way to honor and portray your grandpa? For, I mean, for example, I'm wearing, you know, a pin with him making his very famous
Right.
hand gesture, or I have, you know, an action figure, right?
Yeah,
Which is
I've
kind of
got my
fun
mug.
to hold.
Got
You
my
got your
mug.
mug. How do you decide what will be best for you, for your grandpa's legacy, and
Yeah,
for the fans? Because I feel like the fans are
right.
a huge part of this, right?
Right. Well, you know, it's, I would say, completely fan driven. And also, you know, most of the companies that we work with, they're fans themselves. And so, you know, we like to do things that the licensees feel are important. They're in touch with their fan base, with their clients.
Mm,
And so we put a lot of faith into when they come to us for a license for a particular product, even if it might be different than, you know, we thought of doing. We really do put a lot of trust in them that they wouldn't be going to all this effort if they didn't think it was important and didn't have a passion for Bela Lugosi and Dracula. So, you know, as long as the product is, you know, uh, not derogatory, of course, in any
right.
way, but in it really reflects his character as Dracula. Even maybe if there's take a little creativity to the likeness, as long
Mhm.
as it, you know, maintains that those characteristics of Bela, and you know, pays tribute to his role, and of course the product is of good quality.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you mentioned the license, a little bit of licensing or licensure with uh, the character. I was thinking about the graphic novel that came out
Mhm.
last year, which I see you have over your shoulder as well.
Yes, yes.
Because this is the first time that your grandfather's ever shown with fangs, right?
Right.
Like
Well, yes,
officially.
that yeah, well, officially that we license. Yeah, in fact, I have this poster behind me. I don't know if you can see it with him. He has fangs in that poster,
Oh,
and
really?
that was an old poster, not licensed by us,
Hmm.
from I think the 60s. And it was sold like through Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine. Then it was a door poster. You fit the whole back of your door.
Oh, that's cool.
And
Kind of like
and he
those
had,
fat boy, those fat man or fat boy, whatever posters you can buy today with
yeah.
um like NFL players or whatever, right?
Right. So yeah, these, I think they were just paper posters. This one
Yeah.
is on a foam board. I actually bought it at auction because we didn't have one, and it wasn't licensed by us. I just thought it was cool because it did show them with fangs, and I just liked the age of it. But
Yeah.
as far as the graphic novel, yes, that was a decision that we made. You know, when we decided to license Bela's likeness as Dracula from Bram Stoker's novel. It was, we took it as a new role for him, even
Yeah.
though he's an icon for the role. His portrayal in the Universal film and on stage was very different than the book. And so we felt, in order to be true to the character and give my grandfather all this time later that an opportunity to play the character in a little bit different way,
Mhm.
we agreed to the fangs.
Right. Not the mustache, at least yet.
No,
Because
I know.
Dracula in the novel where he has a very, very long
Right.
mustache and hairy
Yeah.
palms, but I see we left
And
those parts
we
out, right?
contemplated that, and we just
Oh, did you
you
really?
know, yeah, it was just you know, just we knew that we were allowing some parts of the characters described and not others, because we just felt as um for the fans, they
Yeah,
would want to see Bela this the way we portrayed him, you know, without the
right.
mustache and the long hair.
Oh, I did not know that you considered that. That's
Yeah.
'cause a lot
Well,
of times when
maybe, I don't know if you say considered it, but we all acknowledged that we weren't going to go take that next step.
okay, right, you weren't gonna give him a full on
Yeah.
the mustachio.
Although, you know what, he played roles in films where he had, you know, a goatee or beard, and I thought he looked great. So I mean,
Right,
he probably, I'm sure he could have pulled it off. So
right.
maybe we'll do a an alternate version.
There we go. Well, because in the pictures I've seen of your grandpa when he was in I was a soldier in World War I, I've seen pictures where he has a beard and a
Yeah.
mustache, and they're quite impressive.
Yeah. think that that's a picture of him in the hospital. Is that
Mhm.
what it was? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so, well, speaking
Hmm.
of that, could you talk about your grandpa as a young man, like his growing up in Hungary, in
Yeah.
Transylvania, and then his
Right.
role in World War One a little bit?
Right. Well, when unfortunately I didn't get to meet my grandfather,
Right.
but I'm lucky to have been able to have a lot of the researchers and biographers have become family friends, and I have benefited from all of that knowledge, along with of course stories that my dad has told and my grandmother has told. So he growing up, he had a passion for acting. I think he
Mhm.
was born to be an actor. It seems like that was really the only thing he wanted to do. From a young age, he would stage neighborhood plays, and much to this dismay of his father, who wanted him to take a more serious educational route.
Right.
He left home at a very young age and to pursue acting, and having no training whatsoever. And we had to work in the mines and
Mhm.
in train yards, and hung out at the stage door trying to get a part in a chorus, and just worked his way up through the theater system at that time, which you really had to um, win the role by doing, actors would play the same part
Right.
in a play, and the audience really voted who did the
Right.
best. And you
Because wasn't he known as like was one of the Romeo of Shebeki? I can't pronounce Hungarian words very well,
Yeah.
but I think he was like
Yeah.
Romeo or something.
Well, I think that there is a comparison. He
Okay.
played Shakespearean roles. He played all the serious
Hmm.
roles. So he really didn't play horror roles. But I think that that magnetism and romanticism that he exudes so beautifully as Dracula
Yeah.
was always in him. It was
Hmm.
just part of his attraction. Um, to that people just fell in love with his style and his persona.
Right. Yeah, because he was quite
Yeah,
a dashing looking younger man.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
with or
So,
without
but
facial hair.
yeah, but to your question about his participation in World War One, yeah, and by that time he was had arisen in the theater system,
Mhm.
and actors were excluded from fighting in the war, but he felt it was his duty, and to the detriment of his career, um, he
Yeah.
went and he fought, and he was injured 3 times, and
Right.
fought on the Eastern Front. And when he came back to Budapest, he pretty much had to start over in the National Theater, and
Mhm.
win his way back to the roles he desired to play.
Right. He was in the ski patrol, right?
He was on the ski patrol at one point. Yes.
Yeah, and he got shot while skiing by a Russian soldier or something, was
Yeah,
it? Or
yeah. I think he was injured on the Western Front in his shoulder, and
Mhm.
then on the Eastern Front in his leg, and then he also had a head injury.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, there. Yeah, shot 3 times.
yeah.
The man who became Dracula. Um, and then you mentioned, so I mean, he was obviously very passionate about acting, and then he had to
Mhm.
leave Hungary because of his passion for acting in politics, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a very turbulent political time,
Mhm.
and my grandfather's heart was always with his fellow actors and their well-being,
Mhm.
and so he actually started the trade union of actors in Hungary, and you know, with the effort to help the people. Now, with the different regime changes, he ended up on the wrong side of the the regime at that time, and
Mhm.
was blacklisted as far as basically being hunted down. So he left under threat of death,
Right.
along with a lot of other actors and producers and directors who eventually made it to Hollywood and became very famous.
Okay. Yeah, and then we were talking the other day about this, where he was a founding member of the Screen Actors Guild in the United States.
Yes, yeah. So, you know, again, you know, that being an activist and standing up for the rights of actors, especially, you know, that
Mhm.
was important to him. And obviously, when the other actors started realizing that they were being taken advantage by the studios, and they started meeting in secret, he
Mhm.
was there on the ground level. My grandmother has told the story of shortly after they got married, she would drive him to these secret meetings and drop him off. And
Mhm.
so she knew he was in on the ground level. But I think initially he was probably hesitant to put his name out there, just because obviously he had to flee one country under threat because of his activities. And of course, you know, as
Mhm.
an actor who just wanted to work, to get on the bad side of the studios wouldn't have been great. But
Right.
he did end up signing the papers officially and was at member number 28.
We'll turn a little bit to talking about your grandpa in
Yeah.
Dracula.
Mhm.
I think a lot of people are surprised when they learn that your grandpa is originally from Transylvania, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, you know, boy, did it really help the marketing
Right, it paid off,
initially.
right?
Yeah. But yeah, that he was in the area of Hungary, which is, you know, was Transylvania at the
Mhm.
time, where his hometown is now. It actually is in Romania. But
Mhm.
yes, he came from that area. And you know, at the time of his growing up, there was still all of the folklore and the traditions that came from the Roma people, and the his, even his father and his family, you know, believed in some of the the ideas that, you know, were sensationalized and
Mhm.
and really made for a great backstory for the man who was known as Dracula to have come from that area.
Yeah, so he would have grown up hearing stories of vampires
Right,
and the
right,
revenants and
right.
everything.
Yes.
Oh, that's fun. And
Yeah.
then along with that, I think a lot of people have this misconception that your grandpa didn't speak English
Mhm.
right before he took the role on, right? That's obvious.
Oh,
That's not true.
right. Well, you know, I can see how that rumor would, you know, get started, because he did, you know, when he arrived here, he came in through New Orleans and made his way to New York, and went immediately to the Hungarian community in New York and started staging Hungarian language plays and that.
Mhm.
And so obviously was speaking only Hungarian at that time. And then as he gained more roles, you know, obviously it became necessary for him to learn English. But the role that he played in The Red Poppy, which
Mhm.
really um, gained him more widespread attention for English speaking play, he did memorize his lines phonetically for that play. But by the time he was cast in Dracula, he had learned English and spoke English.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, because it
Yeah.
sounds like he had a grasp of English by the time in 1931 and
Yeah.
everything. And
But you
speaking
know,
of, I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, you know, his accent, while is so iconic now, and you know, there has been discussion that because of his accent, and that he didn't ever not use his accent, that it limited the roles
Mhm.
that he had. But you know, he really in his social life, he spent time with his family and friends in the Hungarian community. And so he really did speak Hungarian first.
Yeah.
Like my dad would say, he one time his dad told him he did all his serious thinking in Hungarian and then translated it.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. That's super cool. Um, and then with um, the accent you mentioned,
Hmm.
when you hear other people unknowingly or otherwise like do a vampire voice, a
Yeah.
la your grandfather, what does that
Yeah.
make you think? How do you feel when you hear somebody do
It's
the
fun.
voice?
It's fun. I mean, it's a great voice. So it's not
Right.
like, sometimes they're making fun, but mostly they're just mimicking, and it's, it's an honor, and it's fun, but you can definitely pick it out who's trying and to be like him.
Yeah. Kind of like, was it because the Count Von Count in Sesame Street is inspired
Right.
by your grandfather, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And we love that. My dad's always loved that character.
Right. That's super. And then and Count Chocula as well.
Right.
And I love that they used images of your grandfather in the 80s, in 1987, I believe it was, to help advertise Count Chocula as well,
Right.
correct?
And yeah, he was in a commercial where they, for that time, I look now like, potential advertising use. And I think, wow, they did a pretty good job with that commercial back then,
Right?
it,
Yeah.
like, I don't know what the technical name is, superimposing him behind the
Mhm.
little girl eating the cereal.
It is a really good commercial. I'll have to link it in the description
Yeah.
below here.
Yeah.
But it always makes me feel old because it came out the year I was born. And I
Oh,
was like, and
really?
I'm like, oh no, like that's an old commercial. Oh no, I'm old.
What year? Let's see, what year was
80,
that?
87.
Okay. Yeah. You know what's so funny
Mm,
is at at that time in my
mm,
life, you know, I had, obviously grown up with the name and seeing my dad do his thing and interviews
mhm.
and the photos all over a house and all that. But still, even then, when that commercial came on, I was completely surprised and shocked by it.
Yeah,
And I had no idea that they were
really.
doing that. Yeah. I mean, it was just like, so I wasn't involved then. And even to the point where I really didn't have, I don't know, I guess the awareness, just different time
Mhm.
in my life, having, you know, young kids and having just gotten married. It was, my focus was not there.
Right.
But yeah, it's amazing that, now, and the awareness or the popularity of Dracula or Bela Lugosi as Dracula has kind of gone in waves
Mhm.
over the years. My dad, has told me about that, and I've seen it a little bit in this last 10, 12 years. But I don't know. I just feel like with everything going back to remakes
Mhm.
of the originals and the classics becoming, I think, more important, um,
Yeah.
than ever, I see his name and likeness everywhere,
Right.
you know, referenced everywhere. It's great. I mean, I'm overwhelmed by it and proud, and it's just a wonderful thing to see.
Right. Well, especially since, as we mentioned earlier, this video is coming out on Halloween, and we're
Yeah.
on in October now, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't hardly go into a grocery store and not see a vampire on a bag of chocolates
Right.
or candies that
Yeah.
are clearly inspired by your grandfather with his widow
Right.
peak or
Right.
cape.
Yeah.
What does that make you? What does that make you feel or think when you see your grandfather on, like,
Yeah.
a bag of mixed chocolates in a way?
Right. I know. Well, the licensing part of
Mhm.
me says, hey, we should have the official likeness on there. But I always have to try to, um, like, pay attention and not like it becomes so normal that I don't like, I don't want to ever take for granted where those images came from,
Right.
to, anybody really, um, will eventually relate any of those, candy packages,
Mhm.
little stuffed toys, whatever, back to Bela Lugosi when they see him as
Yeah.
Dracula.
What is it like for you then to think or to realize that your grandfather is essentially the quintessential
Yeah.
vampire, like, mold or image, right? When you
Yeah.
think vampire, you think widow's peak, accent, cape,
Yeah.
aristocrat.
Yeah.
No offense to Twilight, but not sparkling so much.
Right. Right. Yeah. He could like put the cool and debonair into the character for sure. I just, I have to just say, I think he was just born and destined to play that part,
Mhm,
for better or for worse for him personally as an actor.
mhm.
Uh, it's just, you know, we say Bela Lugosi is Dracula. I mean, it's just it. I don't know what to say other than everything came together
Right.
along his career to ultimately lead to that point where he got that role on stage and created his interpretation. And it was just so powerful. I mean, there's certain actors who, create a role that it stays with them for their whole life. And, he's one of those handful.
Yeah, because he was originally not cast as Dracula in the Todd Browning adaptation, correct?
Right. Yeah. I mean, Lon Chaney Sr. was I guess scheduled to play the part, and unfortunately he passed away.
Right.
But, and I don't know, there's several, thoughts on why he wasn't immediately cast for the part, because at that point, his success on Broadway, was well known, and he had already come to the West Coast to start the West Coast production. So he was already here in the area. But, Universal was going through a hard time at that point, and they took a big chance that a horror film would be successful and not just ruin their studio. And so I think that they were worried that even though Bela they had played the role so beautifully on stage, that he didn't hold the name value to carry a film to the theaters. But and then they went on a big search that was very public, in all the trades, who they were at casting, who they were bringing in. So part of me thinks that they had him in mind, but they were just building up this huge hype of who would be Dracula. So yeah, eventually the Universal sent a contingent of executives to see him perform on stage in Dracula in Oakland, California, and soon after brought him in for an audition. And even then, it took months and months to actually have them announce that he would play the role.
Right.
And the rest is history.
There you go. Have you ever seen the Dracula as a play? Have you ever seen opportunity to see it as a theatrical performance?
Not like a Broadway performance of it. I've seen high school performance of it, and I've seen,
really?
Yeah, my high school that I went to, and then when our son was in high school, they performed Dracula. It was pretty fun.
And I trust your kids, or you were cast as a titular role. Like, you got something like tree number 5, or
no, we were just in the audience. So.
Oh, okay.
But my son's girlfriend at the time played Mina, so that's
something.
The big deal. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, but gave the teacher, the drama teacher, of course, a Lugosi shirt to wear during that. But I have also gotten to see ballets of Dracula, and that was probably one of my favorite performances of the story, was that when I saw that. In fact, a friend just contacted me and said the Oregon Ballet is doing it. So
I'm looking into buying tickets.
Well, maybe we'll go at the same time. I'm thinking.
There we go. We'll get balcony seats, and we'll wear our swag. That would be fun.
Don't forget your monocle.
Yes. Oh yes, and my opera glasses and everything, and drink with champagne pinky out. Right. That's fun. We're going on now 90 years, right? With the film with Dracula, here, right, my copy right here, being having been premiered. Like, so what's that like going 90 years on now with this franchise, this film, and seeing your grandfather perpetually, in lights, I guess.
Right. Well, sometimes I have to step out of my little bubble that I'm in, because I'm so involved, and I look at my grandfather's face every day and running the business, to realize that it's not just me and not just this little group that I'm with. I mean, obviously Universal knows the value of those classic horrors, and Dracula being the first of those classic horror films. I mean, they're re-releasing it on 4K, I think, this month.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, I think that the film world, treasures it, at the film itself. And so being that 90 years later, it's still shown in theaters and screened now and streamed, not only around Halloween, but all year long, but especially around Halloween. I mean, how many films are still being screened in theaters 90 years later?
Yeah, I mean, probably not too many. Think of a movie from the 1930s and it's all, probably general audience might just be, Dracula, Frankenstein.
Right.
And speaking of, I see the Frankenstein monster's mask behind your shoulder there.
Yeah.
Your grandpa was originally cast in that movie, right?
He was, and our biography that will be coming out hopefully sometime in the near future. My grandmother related to the author, really the disappointment that my grandfather had around that, because he received a script. He was cast as Dr. Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And he was thinking that this would be even a bigger role and a bigger success for him than, his role as Count Dracula. And then for whatever reason, Universal got a new director, changed the script and offered him the role of the monster, which at that time it wasn't what he felt was an important acting role.
Right.
So, I think, my grandmother's thought at least was if he would have had an agent or someone saying, just take the role,
right,
and do it.
Deal with the makeup, right?
Right. History would be a difference. It would be a different story.
Right.
But as it was, he turned down the role and later ended up playing the monster in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman.
Right. And I wonder if they'd have kept the script how Shelley wrote the creature, because in the novel he's incredibly articulate. Learn to read Milton's Paradise Lost on his own, essentially.
Right.
I would wonder how that would have, if that would have impacted your grandpa and been like, oh yeah, I can suffer through the makeup to do this incredibly, well thought out character versus, no offense to Karloff, but grunts.
Right. I mean, Boris Karloff did an amazing job
oh, absolutely.
Just another role that will go down in history, of course. But for my grandfather, at the time when he was offered the role as the monster, he had played Igor in 2 films. And
I was just going to ask you about Igor. You read my mind.
Yeah. So, and that role was one of his personal favorites because he really got to create that character and bring the humor to it that he wanted to. But with regard to him playing the monster, what was very sad about the way that Universal edited that film, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, is at the end of Ghost of Frankenstein, Igor's brain is put into the monster. But it causes him to be blind, but they don't explain that in the next film. So he's, where he's walking around with his hands like that, which has become another cliche.
Right. Yeah.
Of the monster was really, Bela being blind, but they didn't explain that. And they also, he took the role because it had speaking parts, and he thought as Igor speaking through the monster, he could bring some feeling to the role. And they took out all the lines, but they left his lips moving. So, I mean, it really did him a huge disservice.
They left the lips moving, but took the audio away?
Correct.
Oh, that's dirty.
Yeah. So
that's so dirty.
I really wish that there was a print of that film with that audio. I would have loved to have heard him.
Yeah. Right. That's a bummer.
Yeah.
That is a bummer. Do you know, speaking of Karloff and Chaney, do you know any or contact any of the other family members of the classic horror films at all, or?
Yeah, well, this is the kind of when uh, I guess it was like 1995.
Mhm.
I think around that time, my dad was invited to a famous Monsters of Filmland convention to kind of reboot the magazine, and they
Mhm.
invited Sarah Karloff, Boris Karloff's daughter, and Ron Chaney, who is Lon Chaney Jr.'s grandson,
Okay.
and I think Dwight Price's
Okay.
son or grandson at that time, to come to this convention. And they just said, okay, we'll go. It was kind of new. They didn't, none of the, my dad a little bit more had been taking on the role of representing his father's name and likeness,
Mhm.
just because of the lawsuit and because he was an attorney. But I don't believe that Sarah Karloff or Ron Chaney had really done anything as far as licensing or representing their family. So when they
Yeah.
went to this convention and there were people waiting in lines to talk to them and get their autographs, they were just in shock and blown
Yeah.
away that people want to do this. So anyway, they became friends, because of the situation, and always being you know interviewed together as
Mhm.
families of the classic monsters and that. So they became friends, and so I enjoy a nice relationship with Sarah Karloff and Ron Chaney and his family,
Oh, that's
and we
wonderful.
see them at once in a while at conventions, and it's like a little reunion.
Nice. Do you kind of ever feel like classic Hollywood horror, like monster royalty at all, or
Not me. I mean,
not
even
you?
like doing this interview is hard for me.
Oh,
I was, as a kid, I would hide under the table when people sang happy birthday to me. So doing these kind of things is really stepping out of my comfort zone, but I
well, we
feel such a
appreciate it, Lynn.
responsibility that thank you for helping me get used to it.
Oh, well,
But no, as far
we're
as
pleased as punch to have you here today.
uh, as far as Hollywood royalty, not me, but I'm certainly happy to represent my grandfather, who
Mhm.
I do consider to be Hollywood royalty.
Right. And then you mentioned going to conventions. You still in like in non-pandemic years, right?
Right.
Go to conventions. What's it
Yeah.
like to meet with fans that
Uh,
show up for these events?
yeah. I obviously at the beginning didn't know what I was getting into, and having never been to a horror convention or any
Mhm.
kind of a fan based convention, I was really like in shock. But then I realized it's the most fun thing for me to do. I do enjoy talking to people, and I have learned so much. There, people know a lot more about all of my grandfather's films than I do, and so
Yeah.
they'll talk to me, but really it's just this overwhelming feeling of how well loved my grandfather is. I think not only because he played Dracula, but
Mhm.
people, um, they relate to his story. They relate to his story on a human being level, and they
Mhm.
relate to the Dracula character.
Mhm.
And so there's this connection because we're kind of all in the same situation, that we have great conversations. People are so respectful and um, just overwhelmingly kind.
Yeah.
It's really one of my favorite things to do.
That's awesome. When you say relate to him on a human level, what do you mean by that?
Well, I think because Bela was typecast
Mhm.
and also had his struggles at the end of his life, with being addicted to painkillers,
Mhm.
and publicly going through that, I think that he became very real
Mhm.
and relatable to people, and so you have that aspect, and then also um, just the fact that his magnetism still jumps off the screen, so people still are attracted to him,
Right.
all these years later. And so when my dad is at the convention, or me or family members, it's just that one step closer to the actual person that that the people visiting with us appreciate. But
Right.
yeah, I think just all positive, all good things.
Right. Yeah, because your grandpa was one of the very first celebrities to make to publicize having an addiction to opiates, correct?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that was very
Yeah.
public, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just, yeah, it's a hard time to talk about. A lot of people focus only on that
Hmm.
and um, kind of perpetuate misinformation
Right.
that he was an addict his whole life or for 20 years, which he didn't help because in some ways, um, the publicity he gained from that, he kind of took advantage of that a little bit. But, um, you know, it's not really right to focus on that part of his life.
Mhm.
It was such a difficult time and such a short part of a very long career and a long life that
Right.
um, it's become sensationalized. So we try to keep it in perspective in that, he was brave to do it. It was a
Hmm.
hard thing that he went through. Of
Hmm.
course, there was a lot of other, things that attributed to that.
Right.
Uh, but it's not right to focus on it.
Right. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
not the larger Bela Lugosi story, right?
Right.
One facet of a man's complicated full legacy, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then back to the conventions.
Hmm.
And then we've talked before that people will show you their tattoos of your
Yeah.
grandfather. What's
Right.
that like?
It's amazing. I mean, I don't have any tattoos, but I
Nor do I.
completely appreciate the art because it,
Hmm.
it's not only the tattoo person who has the tattoo, but the artist who, is recreating my grandfather on someone for the rest of their life. And for
Right.
someone to want to do that, to hold him that close and to, you know, be so proud to wear him on their body. I mean, it's just, there's not a whole lot more significant of a tribute that you can
Right.
pay to someone. I mean, wearing a t-shirt is one thing, but when you
Yeah.
have it on your body. And so you would think that they would all look the same, but
Mhm.
really they're all different,
Yeah.
it's wonderful. And a lot of times they'll have either all vampires or all classic monsters or,
Mhm.
it's just great. Men, women,
All
it's
across the board.
all across the board. And hopefully, I mean, you and I have talked about this. Hopefully we can put together some imagery of
Mhm.
some of the people that we've met in person over the years that
Right.
have these great tattoos.
Yeah, I've seen a few when I Google search Bela Lugosi tattoos, and there are
Uh,
some amazing artistry out there with
right,
full sleeves of
right,
classic horror monsters of your grandfather right next to
right.
Karloff as Frankenstein's
Uh-huh.
monster and the Wolfman, or
Right,
full legs, and that's got
right,
to say something to have, to literally walk
right,
around with your grandfather on
right.
every day.
Yeah, we've been at either horror conventions or not horror conventions,
Mm.
and I'll be with my husband, and he'll see a tattoo, and he chases people down, chases people down, and say, "Can you take a picture?" And we talk about it. But yeah, it's created some unusual experiences and interactions, but almost all positive.
I mean, I imagine with your husband running somebody down, asking about a tattoo, that has to take
Yeah,
somebody by
as he's wearing a
surprise.
Bela Lugosi t-shirt,
Right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then they all of a sudden meet, the man's tattoos descendant. That's got to be
Right.
like, honey, you're never going to guess what happened to me today.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. And
Yeah.
then, so then conventions, you go all around the country or more in California or?
No, the only one that we've ever attended years and years ago was Chiller Theater in New Jersey. And
Mhm.
that was like, I don't know, 20 years ago.
Okay.
But anyway, we try to stay around the Los Angeles area. It's just
Okay.
it was never like part of what my dad wanted to do was to go and have a table and sell stuff.
Mhm.
He likes to meet with people and chat with people. And so he just more focused on areas around us that we could get to easily, or doing phone or television interviews. But I found, since I've been doing this, that people love the authorized merchandise sold by the authorized
Yeah.
licensor in the family. And so I when I go, I take all of our stuff.
Right.
Because it's so much fun, because you get to talk to people at the same time, and they can see, the officially licensed things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of the licensing, what are some of your favorite products that you've seen your grandfather on? Because I mean, I'm wearing a pin with this very famous hand gesture. We mentioned the action figure, and you sent me one of these Keshi
Right.
action figures, which has, I found it rather ironic. It has the Phantom of the Opera in mind.
Oh, is that what you got? Yeah.
That's what I got. Yeah. So I was like, there's some poetry in that, especially with the similar cape and the history between the roles.
Right.
What are some of your favorite? I mean, you're drinking out of a Bela Lugosi mug right now. You have a whole array of things behind you. What are some of your favorite things that you've seen your grandfather on?
Oh my gosh, that's really a tough one. I mean, it's October now, and I always bring out the box of Lugosi shirts that we have over the years, and those are kind of fun, because the old styles, people are like, "Oh, where did you get that?" I'm like, "Sorry, they don't make them anymore." It's just kind of fun to have those old. But as far as products, I don't know. We have such a wide variety now. I mean, the wine that we had done in the past and we intend to do was great, because not only was it a beautiful bottle and tribute to my grandfather, but it was great wine, and so that was fun.
That never hurts.
Yeah. I really appreciate being part of the music industry, and having a licensed Bela Lugosi guitars through ESP Guitars. I think that was really fun and unique. And one of the guitars is a replica of Kirk Hammett's White Zombie guitar.
Oh, cool.
And so people really love that connection, and that's something we're really proud of. Gosh, I don't know. I mean, the dolls are fun. We have
the action figure here with the red line cape, not the gray original lining, right?
Yeah. We have a couple figures coming out at the beginning of next year and in fall of next year that are some of the best likenesses on action figures that at Bela that I've ever seen, and so I'm excited to see those when they come out.
Okay. Yeah. So start getting my wallet ready.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that's the thing is they always come out with the regular version and the deluxe version and that.
Yeah, with like 13 or 80 points of articulation and whatever. I mean, I don't think you can do 80. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But
so to what's my favorite? I don't really know. I don't, I can't really, I guess, you know what? I have to say that replicating Bela's screen worn cape that had been in our family for my dad's whole life was probably the most significant licensed item that we've done, just because there's nobody else that can do that one. We have the pattern to it, and it was produced as close as possible to the actual cape. So I have to say, now that I think about it, the cape would be probably my favorite.
That makes sense. Yeah. I should have worn that for the interview. I let you down, Lynn. Yeah, so speaking of that, because I've brought it to my class, my one that you've gifted me, and the students immediately all do the same Dracula pose. You've seen that before in conventions too, right?
Right. Oh yeah, and they're people are usually together, and they'll lean the girl over and pretend to bite her neck, and I don't know, and other people are like, oh, it's so cozy, I just want to wear this around the house.
Yeah, I've had people be like, oh, it's like a vampire snuggie.
Yeah, it is. It really is. It's so giant, in scale. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's fun. And people put the cape on and you kind of feel like you have a little piece of Bela and Dracula on you.
Mhm.
It changes you a little bit for a moment while you have it on.
Right. Even, when doing the actions and the voice a little bit, I'm
Right,
not even going to try
right,
and
right.
replicate my accent
Come
version
on,
of it.
don't ask me, but you should try.
Oh, I can't ask you to do it. Literally.
No, no way.
Listen, the children of the night, what music they make.
Good.
Okay, my
Pretty
Minnesota
good.
accent didn't quite do it justice, but the O's.
Very good.
But that's a first. That's a
Yeah.
folkwise first right there. Um, that's great. I'm so embarrassed right now. Uh,
No, it's great.
so going back to a little bit when you're talking about seeing Dracula in theater, and now I'm just thinking I need to practice my Hungarian accent. You've told me before the story when you saw Dracula in theaters, right? I was
Mhm.
wondering if you could tell our viewers and
Yeah.
listeners a little bit about that story when you saw the remastered orchestra
Right.
version on Halloween.
Yeah. Well, one of the local theaters, old theaters in the theater district in LA here a couple years ago, um, screened the remastered version of Dracula with a live orchestra, the Kronos Quartet, who did one version of Universal's releases with a musical score because
Mhm.
Dracula didn't have a score. So anyway, I just thought it would be fun. It was on Halloween to do as an event. So,
Mhm.
we went as a family and people were dressed in costume. We dressed in our usual black, but
Right.
we weren't in costume, all of us. Some of our friends were. But anyway, it was this great old, you know, 1920s theater, it
Mhm.
was all decorated for Halloween, and we sat in the audience, and they had the orchestra and the film, and there was a lot of young people there who had never seen the film before, and so in some ways they thought it was a little old school and cheesy, I'm sure. But what really struck me is when my grandfather comes down the stairs and says, "I
Mhm.
am Dracula," the theater erupted in cheers. And,
Yeah.
I still get chills when I talk about it because I was just sitting there going, oh my gosh, I loved it. I was enjoying it. I was so glad my kids were there. But just to see that and feel that vibe in the
Mhm.
theater and to see him on the, real big screen, beautiful clarity and beautiful sound, and just like jumped out of that screen and into all of our hearts.
Right.
It's really
And
a powerful moment.
and you weren't dressed because I think you mentioned before that people were dressed in costume, right?
Yeah.
And
No,
you
we
were
were not dressed in costume, and we were just there
yeah.
as,
You weren't
yeah.
wearing your bat necklace that day then,
No,
or
I maybe was wearing a bat necklace. I'm not sure.
nice. 'Cause that is an awesome necklace. I have a lot
Yeah,
of
this
that's
one, it started early at these conventions that my husband always goes with me and helps me out, and he's like, he's the reason people come to our booth. He's very energetic. But anyway, he'll walk around, and I never get to leave the booth to see what
Mhm.
else is around. So he went around, he bought me a bat necklace at one point, and
Aw.
I loved it. And so now that's his goal. Everywhere we go, he's looking for bat necklaces. So I've got a really nice collection. And it started because I have my grandmother's original bat necklace that she
Mm.
wore. And so while that's not an everyday piece that I wear, I do enjoy having my little drawer full of things that my husband has bought me.
That's that's very sweet. That's a
Yeah.
very cute story. And does he try and find them like at just conventions or like if you're out like on a vacation to like Grand
Yeah.
Canyon?
Yeah, mostly on at conventions,
Okay.
but every once in a while he'll come across something and I'll think that it would be a good thing for me to have.
I'll keep my eyes open in case I see something. I'll tell your husband
Okay.
I found something. Like, hey Bob,
Okay.
I
Yeah.
get the inside scoop
Yeah.
on that one for you.
Yeah.
That's funny. You were
Yeah.
mentioning a minute ago about the wine, right? Because you've mentioned
Yeah.
you've licensed your grandfather's image out to a few beverages, right? I think you had a bag of coffee behind
Yep.
you,
Right.
and the beer. What's
Yep.
that like? that process of getting, how do you decide based on your grandfather's tastes and what's popular now, what to
Right.
market?
Well, the wine kind of like fell into place. My dad had always wanted to do a wine as a tribute to his dad, and we have a lot of the other fan-based merchandise, figures, models, statues, posters that. But this I think would have been the wine would be a product that my grandfather would really have been proud of and enjoyed himself.
Hmm.
And so my dad, ran into somebody who was interested in producing it. And so that's how the wine started. And it was a small edition but very successful. And of course, checks all kinds of boxes as far as, it's a fan product. It was a great wine in and of itself. It was highly rated.
Right.
And so we'd like to continue doing that. It's a little bit of a challenge, but we will continue to do that. So stay tuned.
I will keep that. I'll keep our wine cellar as if we have a cellar.
Yeah.
I'll keep our wine rack open.
Right. Right.
Cellar.
But so after the wine, it was kind of a natural progression to do a beer, especially with all the craft breweries and people were doing like horror themed and Halloween themed beers anyway. So a friend of ours did ask us to license his name and likeness for a beer. It was a dark sour, Phantom Carriage Brewery here in Long Beach. But it went over well, and again, something we'd like to pursue in the future.
I find that so interesting that it was a dark sour beer, because I think your father told me once that that Bela's favorite beer was Coors.
Yeah. Not exact, kind of opposite ends of the
very different different families. Like you couldn't have found a much more opposite.
Right. Well, I think the thinking of the brewery at that time was the dark sour was kind of went with the vampire kind of theme, and we weren't necessarily going for a beer that Bela would have liked. It was just something that it was what, like I said before, when you say, when somebody comes to you and wants to use the license, they're coming and they have a reason for what they do. And so at that time, the dark sours were becoming really popular and trendy. And I think that was their reason for that. So.
Yeah, that's about the only time I'd actually willfully try drink a sour beer, is if that was the case. That's I respect the game, but I can't play it. Right. That's
well,
funny.
maybe the next one will be a light. It'll be a light beer.
There we go. They're a white zombie blonde ale or something like that. We'll workshop that later. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
And then you have a coffee too, right? Which is I think that's behind you. Was it, or
is it behind me?
Yes.
Do you want me to grab that?
That's okay.
Oh, okay.
It's just it's funny to see like a coffee when it's a vampire and you want to stay awake.
Exactly. It's a company called Dead Sled Coffee in New Jersey, and they're a small roaster, and they have other horror themed coffees, and it was a real fun project, and I understand that it does quite well.
Yeah, well, it is good. I still actually have the bag, even though it's empty, even though I consumed it all.
Right. I actually need to order some more. I really enjoy it. We got to, taste different roasts and choose it, and wrote a nice story for the label, and I think it's a really great product.
Oh, did you write that?
You can buy it online. You don't have to live in New Jersey.
Okay. Oh, well, good, because I live in Oregon. That's a bit of a drive.
Yeah.
That's fun. I was wondering then, Lynn, if we could talk a little bit more about your grandfather's performance, right, as Dracula. What about it do you think is so iconic? That makes it so, make him, was it Jeffrey Winestock, a film scholar, referred to your grandfather's performance in that movie as the vampire of all time, the performance. What do you think makes your grandfather's performance as Dracula is so iconic and lasts 90 plus years.
Yeah. I just think that, like we talked about before, that he was meant for that role.
Mhm.
And, both the fact that he came from that area of the world
Mhm.
and it could relate to the impact that those stories had on people,
Yeah.
and had the ability to both terrify through his acting while at the same time
Mhm.
attracting you to him. I think that he changed, the that portrayal made it so that the character, and at least his interpretation, will go on.
Mhm.
I mean, really, it's either a very, very vicious, bloody, version of a vampire,
Right.
or his version. And I think his version is more appealing to a wider audience, and
Mhm.
it's the reason he has become an icon. Because um, little kids like the Count, you can
Mhm.
still have this vampire because Bela didn't make it, so he was, it wasn't an R-rated version. So his
Right.
interpretation, yeah. But for adults, the underlying terror of um, becoming undead, but becoming undead by, especially for women, being attracted to somebody,
Mhm.
and entranced by that person because of the way they looked and how they moved. I just think that there's so many aspects of his portrayal that were so unique and so powerful that they can only be mimicked. They can't really be changed unless you do a completely different interpretation of a very, ferocious,
Mhm.
vicious, not really, not thinking on a human level kind of vampire.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
your grandfather's very different performance and aesthetics compared to Count Orlok, right? In
Right.
Murnau's Nosferatu, like we were talking about earlier, we have that
Right.
he's very alien looking with his
Mm-hmm.
appearance and rat,
Yeah.
long like everything,
Right.
versus your suave, like
Right.
East European aristocrat
Right.
grandfather. It's like,
Right.
which one would you rather? They're both
Right.
gonna get you, but which one
Right.
would you rather have like dinner with?
Right. Well, I think too that the thing that scared so many moviegoers at the time is that the thought that this monster could walk among you.
Right.
Right. It wasn't somebody necessarily hiding in the dark, to jump out at any particular time.
Mhm.
It wasn't scary to look at.
Mhm.
That this monster could walk among you.
Right. Yeah. That does make sense that's why he's so eerie and alarming, is he's right next to you
Mhm.
and you don't know what he's capable
Yeah.
of. And he's a
Somebody,
handsome looking dude.
right. Somebody sent me just this morning like a meme that they saw online, and I don't really know where it came from yet. I want to track it down, but it said was it September 30th?
Mhm.
And it had a picture of Bela out of character, just kind of a serious, still.
Yeah.
And then it said October 1st, and it had him in his Dracula outfit.
I'd like to
So
see that if you can find
yeah,
that. That's
I'll send
funny.
it to you.
Thank you. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Um, that's wonderful. And then I was going to ask too, what are some other, if you're going to say, somebody asks you, what are the recommendations for other movies that are not Dracula that you think you know, somebody should see that and feature your grandfather? What are like, a handful of movies like you should see, these other ones? What would you
Oh,
recommend?
right. Well, for people who, haven't already seen them, I would think that White Zombie
Mhm.
was a favorite of my grandfather's because he got to direct some of it,
Oh, did he
and
really?
yeah, he was proud of it. Yeah, I think they had lower budget, and the
Mhm.
director was kind of, I don't know what happened exactly. There's a lot of stories been written about that and books, but he got to step in and direct some of the scenes, and I think that was really something he enjoyed. But anyway, it also really, they referred to it as one of the original zombie films. It wasn't like Walking Dead zombies. He was like a zombie master as his character, but
Right.
it always is credited as one of the first zombie films, and it's a good movie,
Yeah.
I would say. And Son of Frankenstein, where he
Mhm.
played Igor for the first time, he's just so great in that role. I mean, I enjoy it every time.
Mhm.
Um, Black Cat with
Okay.
Boris
Yep.
Karloff,
Mhm.
and even some of the other movies where he starred with Boris Karloff, in The Raven and Invisible
Mhm.
Ray. They're really powerful roles, and creepy, and I think well worth watching if you're a Bela fan or just a horror movie fan. And
Right.
then, traditionally people love Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein,
Mhm.
just because he was only the second time he actually played the character Dracula, but he played it straight, and Abbott and Costello brought the humor. So it was a good combination, and people really liked that film.
That's awesome. Thank you. There's your Halloween playlist brought to you by Lynne Lugosi Sparks.
Yeah. Well, it's hard because I'm going back again
Mhm.
and rewatching things in chronological order.
Oh, really? What's
Yeah,
that? That's
and
got to be
so
fun.
yeah, and so I can't actually remember where on my list I left off, but so not all of the films are readily available, or
Mhm.
there's good prints available. So one of the legacy projects we're doing is trying to acquire the actual film prints
Mhm.
of as many Bela's films as we can, and
Okay.
we've donated them to the Academy Film Library and in the Bela Lugosi collection. So
Mhm.
while some of these films prints can be found at other film archives,
Mhm.
what I'm trying to do is have as a collection as many of his work product as possible. So
Mhm.
in doing that, and they're getting harder and harder to find because
Right.
the films are deteriorating, or they've just been copied and so many times that the quality isn't good.
Right.
But anyway, I'm trying to go watch the ones that have already been put out, like on DVD and that, and,
Mhm.
and to see how our prints might compare to those.
That's cool. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
trying to find a few movies of featuring your grandfather on Hulu last night, and there was only
Hmm.
two available, but they were both blocked unless I wanted to pay extra.
Oh, what really?
Yeah.
What were they? Which
Um,
ones?
one of them was White Zombie, and I forget the other.
Uh-huh.
But I have White Zombie on DVD, so I'm not too
Yeah.
worried about that.
Yeah.
Because I have a 20 set collection DVD that you recommended that I
Yes.
see. And then is there an arc, speaking of the Legacy Project, is there a list of his filmography that you'd recommend people who are interested in watching his performances visit, or?
Yeah. Well, our website, belalugosi.com,
Mhm.
there is a part of the website that lists all of his films and all of his US stage plays. He had probably over 200 performances in Budapest alone before he came, to this country. So it's almost impossible to list those all on the website, but the
Okay.
films are all there. The
At
films and
least
shorts
listed at least as far as, yeah.
listed. Yes.
Yeah, okay. Great.
Yeah. Ideally, I'd like to have a site where we can stream our prints.
Mhm.
I just didn't, there's some, you know, hoops to jump through on that.
Right.
But
Yeah.
what's nice is the actual film being at the Academy, and with the new Academy Museum, they have the ability to screen, like 35 millimeter nitrate prints. And so we do have a couple of those in our collection. And so that'll be nice if the museum screens them. But the Academy also Film Archive also does screenings.
Okay.
So we feel like it's a good place for the films to be. But as far as getting them to the wider uh, public,
Mhm.
that is something I'd like to do. And so there's so many streaming services, and a lot of those films have fallen into the
Yeah.
public domain that I can't keep track of where they're being shown either.
Yeah. So what's that like then, going through chronologically and seeing your grandfather, develop as an actor or try
Yeah,
new roles, or
yeah.
how's that going for you?
He obviously has a style,
Hmm.
and even early on, that style, stayed with him.
Yeah.
And it's just fun. I feel like no matter the quality of the film, because he was in some, B movies,
Ed Wood.
he,
Yeah.
yeah, he was always the best part of those, any of those films. And
Right.
he just like, he brought the same seriousness to all of those little parts in those B movies that he would, on stage and Broadway. Was he really had a powerful um, presence on screen. So
Yeah.
I do enjoy all the performances, and some I'm like, why don't people know? Why don't people watch this one more? Because it's so good.
Yeah.
But in looking for films, obviously the very very old ones,
Hmm.
either they aren't around anymore, or
Right.
I'm so hoping that one day we'll come across some of the films, the German films and the Hungarian films. But I know from the Hungarian Film Archive, they
Mhm.
only have one piece of one of Bela's films that he
Mhm.
filmed in Hungary, and they showed it to me. It's very short, and I want to say like under 60-second
Mhm.
clip of remaining film. So much of their film was destroyed.
Right. During
But
yeah.
anyway, he's like his role is like a thief, and so they show him looking in the window at this lady who's hiding her money in a safe,
Hmm.
and she leaves, and he climbs in the window, and as he climbs in the window, he has had such an animal like quality to his
Hmm.
movements and his eyes and his hands. It's like he could have been Dracula. I mean, it
Yeah.
was like really creepy. And I was just at my computer by myself watching this clip going, oh my gosh, people need to see this. This is amazing.
Nice.
So when I'm talking chronological, that would have been the first, I'm considering, the first one that I have seen that early. And so that
Yeah.
was really, really fun.
That is fun.
Yeah, so I'm hoping to work with the archive in Budapest, and they're celebrating Hungarians in Hollywood with a museum exhibit right now. And then I think they'd like to do some other tributes to Bela, and maybe screen our print of Dracula in Budapest at some point when it's safe with the pandemic.
Right. Yeah. Um, then real quick, before we conclude, we'll wrap up unless we have anything else.
Mhm.
I guess mentioned a few times, it is Halloween when we're dropping this episode.
Yeah.
Um, what's it like when trick-or-treaters show up to your house dressed as Dracula?
It's well, when they're little, it's
Yeah.
just the most adorable thing ever. Right?
Yeah.
And I can always tell, like, um which of the versions like their parents wanted them to be it, because they love Dracula, because it's
Right.
always like the outfit is more perfect, and the
Mhm.
makeup, and sometimes they'll even do a little interpretation. But it's fun. I mean, you walk up and down the aisles at the costume shops, and there's so many versions of Dracula and capes
Mhm.
and that, and it's fun. I mean, it's just um I have never dressed up as a vampire, I have to say, but
Lynn,
uh,
now's the time. Now you have the cape. Now's the time.
I know, I really want to. Now that we have the cape,
Mhm.
our next step will maybe be a more complete costume to go with it. But I also want to do the brides. I want to do a bride, so
There you
you'll see
go.
me in that. I'll do the bride
There
costume.
we go. I like that. That'll be fun. Because I think I've sent you the picture when I was a kid of me dressed as
Yes.
Dracula. Yeah.
And you know what,
Drop it in.
that's some of the things my dad and I enjoy the most, is when people will post pictures of themselves as Dracula as a kid,
Mhm.
or as an adult. It's so much fun.
Yeah. That's pretty fun. Well, Lynn, that's all I have today
Mhm.
for Folkwise for our interview. Is there anything
Yeah.
else you'd like to share about your grandfather, about your work, about your father at
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
before we conclude?
Well, I don't know, we covered a lot, and, we probably could talk for hours, and I really appreciate the opportunity to, reach your viewers. And if anybody ever has any questions that they think of for me, feel free to contact us through the website. There's a contact form, and I'll answer you, or my dad will answer you. And, we just are really pleased that you have such an interest, and, are helping us continue the legacy of Bela
Well,
Lugosi.
it's a pleasure. Well, thank
Yeah.
you, Lynn, very much, and
Yeah.
happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween, everyone.
Bye.